Hello and welcome to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic, and today we'll be talking about Season 2, Episode 20, Earth to Kaz. So grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in with the episode summary. Kaz presents his personal essay about his hero, Kaor, to his high school class. Tom advises Kaz to cool it with talking about Chaotic in the real world because people think he's crazy. Then Peyton's mom takes away his chaotic stuff, and he gets called into the school psychologist's office. Kaz thinks that if he can prove chaotic is real, the school psychologist will give him all his chaotic stuff back. He ports to Hunter's perimeter to find Peyton, to ask him to call his school to tell the psychologist the name of his son in order to prove that chaotic is real. And then Peyton struggles to remember the phone number, and then he forgets the task and thinks he's ordering a pizza. Then Kaz thinks that if he gets a new scan, that'll prove chaotic is real. So Sarah and Kaz scan Okwa, but the psychologist says he could have gotten that scan a number of other ways. Tom then testifies that chaotic is real, but the psychologists think that Tom is lying to be a good friend. In the end, Kaz's mom decides to give him his chaotic stuff back because he was miserable without it. So onto analysis. This episode is a departure from our typical format. This is a Kaz-focused episode, but instead of the main through line taking place in Chaotic or Param, the main story takes place in the real world, which is not unheard of in terms of a Chaotic TV show storyline. Like in the pilot, there's aspects that are in the real world and in Bojan or Bust. There's aspects in the real world or in the episode Trading Cards, but it's never been an A plot, right? Here's the thing, it's the A plot this time. Big time. This is the A plot we're in the real world, baby. And there are chaotic moments in the episode, but they are like the secondary focus. That's the second version of Kaz going to chaotic and doing these things. The primary focus here, the A plot, is Kaz in the real world with the school psychologist, with his mom, with Tom, with his classmates, right? That's what's going on in this episode. And it's really an opportunity to showcase the dual consciousness mechanic that is built into the world building of Chaotic, right? We have these two versions of Kaz running around, or rather, one is stuck at home with the school psychologist, and the other one is running around Chaotic doing missions to prove that Chaotic is real. But it's interesting and it's a departure from the normal to have an episode be focused in the real world like this. And I would say that's the reason why this episode stands out. It feels different because the subject matter is different. Now, I would say this episode feels like a backdoor pilot, but normally a backdoor pilot is for another TV show, but this just feels like a backdoor pilot, but for Chaotic itself. This is a backdoor pilot for Kaz as the main character, but also Kaz in the real world, you know? So it's not that, it's not pitching a new TV show, but the reason why I say that is because this episode reintroduces the mechanics of the world. It explains the world building pretty explicitly, and that's not something we normally do in an episode, right? Sure, maybe commentary to remind you, but this is if this was the first episode you've seen, that'd be okay, because Kaz is going to catch you up on everything about Chaotic. That, you split your consciousness, that there's different kinds of scannables, that you become the creatures, right? He explains Chaotic to you. And, pretty explicitly. But Kaz does this describing Chaotic to the school psychologist, and so narratively there's a reason for him to be doing it. He's explaining it to a character who is not involved in, the fantasy wrestling imaginary world that is actually real. And so that duality of he's explaining it to the character, simultaneously explaining it to us as the audience, that's the narrative reason for that to happen. And here's the thing, if you're watching the show, you already know all this. You know about scannables, and you know how chaotic works, and you know that you split your consciousness, or you transport your code to chaotic, and then you download your memories later. But you have to remember this show was made in the days of cable, so now that the overarching story is ramping up, and the show's coming pretty cool, right? It's a good story. We're seeing Marillions do mischief, right? We have a titular Marillion invasion title slapped onto season 2, like it's ramping up. Production is up, the products are in stores, right? It's more identifiable as a brand, probably. Am I basing this on history? No. But like just on the fact that we are halfway through season 2, we're 60 episodes into this show, right? That's over a year at least on the air, right? People may have stumbled upon this show, and there are episodes where, like, that I would recommend don't watch this as your first episode. This is not one of them. I would say if you like were stumbling into Chaotic just on cable television, this would be an okay episode to start with. And I think that's why it feels like a backdoor pilot, and that's because it's not a backdoor pilot for another show, but it's a reintroduction of the mechanics of the show so that a casual viewer, so that somebody who just happens on this show for the first time can be welcomed in and understand the world in a way that they wouldn't have been able to do without this, or without like going back to the beginning and starting from the beginning, which, on cable, either buy a DVD or like DVR if they're doing a marathon. It's harder to do that in cable television versus now, like, you go on YouTube, it's all there for free, or you can watch the first season on Amazon Prime, you know? So, like, it's just different now because most people are going to be watching it chronologically versus on cable, who's to say? And so, this episode serves as an easy introduction into the world, but this time through Kaz's perspective. Like, we already did it through Tom's perspective, and that's what the pilot was, the two-part episode 1 and 2, right? And there are similarities here, right? This isn't Kaz's first time going to Chaotic, but it is him explaining it. And really the similarity here is that Sam Shady is in both episodes. You know what I mean? And it is interesting that we don't get a chaotic battle in this episode. He just like we just have a flash reminiscent moment. Now on to the next thing. We've talked about the days of cable, but there is technology in this episode that like dates the show, and it is Peyton's cell phone, I dare to say. Like it really grounds the series in the time period it was made before smartphones were popularized and everywhere. And then also another piece of analysis is, you know, Chaotic is Kaz's escapism from his everyday, which makes sense because it is literally an escape. But with that, the colors in terms of design of like the school and his bedroom even are on the duller side, right? The school is very brown, which makes Chaotic more colorful and bright by contrast. So it contributes to like a motivation for Kaz's escapism, right? If his real life is glum and gray and Chaotic is bright and colorful, you know, there's it impacts the narrative in that way. Like it reinforces those themes. And my only like counterpoint to that would be the outside. Like if you go outside of the houses, if you go outside of the school where it's sunny and bright and the houses are colorful, that's like the exception to that. But like boy, that classroom, I would also be like, get me out of here. Moving on to lore, we do learn some things in this episode, and for example, we learn about the real world that Tom and Kaz have a teacher named Miss Gabler, and that their school has a school psychologist, which is definitely a step above like a guidance counselor or a nurse, right? To be at a school with a school psychologist, that feels special and interesting. That school psychologist has a son named Paul who got into Chaotic and like ran into Kaz. And now, is the school psychologist good at his job? That's another question. But he is there and he is employed. And we also get to meet Kaz's mom, so that's cool and interesting. Now, I would say the big piece of lore in this episode is that nobody's ever figured out a way to prove that Chaotic is a real place, which, like, surely isn't true, but I'm sure that's just not known in Tom and Kaz's circle. But it preserves the secret premise. Like, there's this premise that Chaotic is a secret. You have to get a code to get into it. And it's like built into the secretive world aspect of it. It kind of plays into the tropes of like, say maybe Harry Potter, like there's a secret world that nobody knows about, or other like genre fanfare where you kind of have this chosen one mechanic that takes you out of your status quo into a new world, onto like your hero's journey, if you will, right? There's something about that. And my question is, it begs you to ask the question, would there be any consequences if chaotic was proven real to the mainstream? And like for me, like maybe it would make, the game more competitive. Maybe more people would get into the game and try to play online and become good enough to get into chaotic. Like maybe it would motivate people to get codes and maybe it would drive popularity. Or like people would want to adapt the technology for other purposes. Like I don't think the fact that chaotic is a secret is particularly relevant or would be if like proven otherwise, especially if the playing card game is like established as like a niche or a subculture of some kind. Like if chaotic's a real place, the people who are into it would just get more into it, or maybe would garner new fans. But like I don't see the world blowing up over it if it is just like, it's a hobby to some of these people. Now, on the other hand, you know, would chaotic get ruined if everybody knew about it? There's an exclusivity factor there. Who's to say, right? Tell me what you think about that. Like, why is it a requirement that chaotic be a secret, other than it's just like a trope of genre fanfare? It's just a trope of like being transported into this other world. Let me know. Would there be consequences? I think there would be, but I don't think they would be significant enough to like disrupt the story. Next piece of lore. Now this is a big one. Ihyun Kalen defeats a group of Mopedians at Hunter's Perimeter, which is a Mopedian location. And so that adds to our larger narrative, right? We're in this titular Marillion invasion. And we've seen 4 Marillions emerge from the doors of the deep mines. And I feel like it's a logical conclusion to like conclude that one Marillion went to each tribe to like mess around. And so now we've seen Mila'ine in the underworld and Aikyun Kaelin in Mopedian territory. So I feel like it makes sense that they split up to divide and conquer, literally. But it does show that like Marillions are causing issues outside of just the underworld because we've really focused in on the underworld and the problems that Mila'ine is causing there. But this just hopes to broaden the narrative. It includes that there's like multiple fronts that the Marillions are fighting, and also it just adds to the world building. Like something's happening with the Mopedians, something's happening in the underworld, right? It adds depth and breadth to not what we see, but what we know is going on, to the lore, if you will. Now, onto fun facts and other notes. The battle that Kaz describes in his conversation with the counselor was with Buzz Sr. in season 2, episode 3, the Founding Father episode, with Kaor in the Riverlands, right? That was Founding Father episode. And then also his personal essay that Kaz is telling to the class. It's reminiscent of what happened in the episode Firefighters. Just in that episode, Kaor used the Incinerase attack, but in this, that's not what Kaz said. He said like a different attack. And so either Kaor's out here fighting fires on the regular and Kaz showed up multiple times, or Kaz is an unreliable narrator in his own personal essay. So both of those could be true. Then of course we have Sam Shady cameo again, which at this point, solid recurring character. And we do get a peek into Kaz's room in this new animation style, which I must say stays pretty consistent to what we saw in the first season. We saw peeks of his room in Bodrin or Bust, right? And so like this is a shot from that. We have a blue wall, bookcase, figures, a desk lamp. And then in the new style, it stays pretty consistent. There's a desk lamp, different color. But right, there is a blue wall, and we get the context that the blue is actually an accent wall. And the bookshelf is there. He just rearranged the figures, which is plausible. And like the main decor in his room is mostly chaotic posters, which one, he has 2 KWAR posters, just different sizes, so that's commitment. But it does add to the characterization of, especially in this episode, Kaz is like the chaotic nerd. He's the one who's the most obsessed with chaotic. And so it makes sense that the decor in his room reflects that. Now he does have additional hobbies, like he's has a gaming system with TV and floor chairs, and you know what, good for him, like having a TV in his room, that's neat. But also he has a bunk bed with a ladder that implies that he sleeps on the top bunk, so do with that information what you will. I kind of have to give them props for keeping it so consistent between season 1 and season 2 of Kaz's room, right? They did a similar thing with Peyton's room where it's pretty similar, they just changed some of the colors, but I like the consistency here. Now, my final thoughts on this episode are, frankly, this is not my favorite episode because it is kind of a recap episode and it has a decent amount of like secondhand embarrassment for me, so that's like hard for me to watch. And also like Kaz didn't really learn any lessons, right? What he needed to learn was time and place, right? Don't write your personal essay about chaotic and then present it to the class, right? That's like inappropriate for a school assignment. That's supposed to be about a hero that you have on Earth, right? The teacher didn't need to specify on Earth for everybody else because they got it, you know? Like, sure, Kaz is in pursuit of the truth, if you will, in this episode, but it's time and place. Like, did he tell the truth in his personal essay? Yes. Did he need to do that? No, right? He needed to pull from a different memory, take different inspiration, and that's okay. But do I think Kaz learned that lesson in this episode? No, I do not. On the other hand, I do appreciate the mom character for recognizing the importance that Chaotic has to Kaz's mental health, right? Like without Chaotic, Kaz became depressed. And like, is that an official diagnosis? No. But I do think it's assumed, what, like a week and a half or so that this is happening. Like, I'm expecting some time to pass. I don't think it's 1 day's worth of events. But, like, taking away Chaotic has the unknowing consequence to Kaz of, like, taking away his access to meaningful friendship and, like, physical exercise and exploration and problem solving and curiosity. Just, like, there's so many aspects in Chaotic or Param that, like, keep your mind sharp and your character sharp. You know, good sportsmanship. There's lots of benefits to being in association with the chaotic world and being there. And so, like, these characters in the real world don't realize that they're taking that away from Kaz, which, you know, fine, whatever. But I have to commend the mom for, you know, noticing and then returning the chaotic stuff because it has a benefit to Kaz's mental health. Now, the school counselor, on the other hand, I find him a little condescending, and I feel like he has a mocking tone, and like his diagnosis with Kaz is that he has trouble separating fact from fiction. But like there were definitely some other things they could have delved into. Like he could have found an underlying problem and addressed it. But like whatever, like what is this obsession with the truth? Kaz is in pursuit of the truth, of explaining the truth. He's trying to prove that chaotic is real and that it's true, that he's not a liar. And like there's some conflation with morality between like, you know, lying and truth and that sort of thing, right? And so, but there is like to an excessive degree, and like they could have delved into that. Like, why are you trying to prove yourself so hard? Or like, what other underlying problems are there, right? Is chaotic, does he like it, or is there a reason why there's an obsession there? Is it filling another hole? Is it preventing him from doing other things, right? Obviously, there was a reason for them to be concerned about Kaz because his love of chaotic was preventing him from doing other things. It was preventing his everyday life, which was going to school and being a student, right? And it became a barrier for his education, right? So it was good for them to get involved, but like having him sent to another school where people have trouble separating fact and fiction, right? I just think we could have done a little more there. And I feel like that's what I have to say about that. If you have questions, let me know. But yeah, they could have found the underlying problem and addressed it, and then Kaz would have been fine, right? He could have learned time and place, but he didn't. So yeah, not my favorite episode, but it has its moments. And let me know what you think if I missed anything. If you have any analysis, let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!